Let's watch Bassem Youssef versus Piers Morgan now.
Whenever you speak to people in the Middle East, they tell you the same thing. They're not very happy with the coverage of the Middle East because our voices are not heard. Now, I am the least qualified person ever to talk about this conflict. And yet, just because I relate some of the talking points that we say and we hear the whole time, people felt heard. When people have this feeling, they're happy. They have this response. They say, like, "Oh my God!" For the first time, the West are actually hearing our point.
He's so right.
Some of the points of view might
right.
go well with other people.
It's such an incendiary subject matter. I've never seen social media so ablaze with hostility on both sides. Did you also get criticized by some parts of the Arab world for not going perhaps hard enough?
Oh, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. The thing is, this is like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Right.
If you don't speak up, why don't you speak up? If you speak up, you didn't speak up enough.
I hope Piers doesn't just like use Bassem's like media interest, like because he's a media guy, to just like drive the conversation away to dumb.
You just decide to do 5-minute stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you're expecting a few people to watch it. And then literally it just flies. And suddenly you're getting millions of people watching this. And very quickly, one of the big networks comes in. And then you're suddenly doing this stuff for 30 to 40 million people.
Yeah.
Like a third of the entire population of Egypt is tuning in to watch it. You're the biggest star of Egyptian television.
Oh, please.
But you were.
Don't stop.
No, but I mean, what an extraordinary thing, though, for a heart surgeon to go from helping protesters medically in Tahrir Square at the start of the Arab Spring to within a year, you're the biggest star on Egyptian television. It's a crazy.
It doesn't sound as glamorous.
Stop, dude. Why? Dude, this is so dumb. Anyone who knows they have a moment of opportunity in Western media in front of such a large audience knows that the goal is to talk about Palestinians, talk about Palestinians, talk about Palestinians. Stop glazing yourself up, man. Holy shit. I think he's very good at talking about the situation on the ground. This is why I did not want to have a conversation with Piers Morgan about like propaganda or who's a propagandist or whatever. Not because like, oh, it's an indefensible position. No, I love debating. No matter how much I abhor debate purgatory, I debate fucking hours, okay? I'm stubborn as shit. I'm a stubborn motherfucker. It's just that right now, this is a idiotic time to talk about it. It's selfish.
Because the guards were reading the stuff out and laughing, right?
Well, the guards were taking selfies with me, which is funny. Right. and the exchange between me and the prosecutor, agent prosecutor, was extremely funny. I mean, I don't like to victimize myself. I don't like, oh, look at that. I actually like to find humor.
But why were you arrested? What was the criteria?
Oh, yeah. I think the list was insulting Islam, insulting the president, spreading false rumors, and disrupting the fabric of society.
I don't want to talk about like internal Egyptian politics, okay? And I have stopped short of discussing like Bassem Youssef's own personal perspective, Egyptian politics in general. I hate that like there's a Israel at war ticker on the bottom of the show and they're just like talking about this. Hassan, the interview is 2 hours. You got to chill. I know, but this is the most important part of the interview. This is the part that people watch. And the part that people watch is just like his background.
People would always choose, most of the time, they will always choose the military form rather than the religious form because they kind of like, at least they are not infringing on my personal freedom. Not yet. But
you had threats on your life, didn't you?
Oh, all the time. I don't talk about that because like I have been having death threats, like never stopped since 2011. Never stopped.
Have they continued since our last interview?
Oh, yeah. They never stop.
People threatening to kill you?
All the time.
Why? For what reason?
Oh, for just saying something that they don't like. Oh, because you are against Egypt, you're against Islam.
The problem is, the guy that was overthrown was a popularly elected Muslim Brotherhood guy. And the issue is that he was overthrown with a violent military coup. And the violent military coup took place that also killed a ton of protesters, as a matter of fact, was conducted by U.S.-aligned forces that were supposedly liberal. The issue always, when it comes to affairs in other countries, is that it is more complex than the way you understand it. It doesn't matter. Like anything and everything that people do, if it does not serve America's interests, will always be used against them. So the people always are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Mossadegh was only popular amongst Muslim Brotherhood members and people wanted him out, but didn't want another military piece of shit, but the revolution got hijacked. I mean, this has happened in Turkey as well. This happens everywhere. It's a constant. It's a constant in places like Turkey as well. It's a constant in places like Iran as well. You have Western influence that creates a lot of anger and resentment in the population, a lot of death and destruction at the behest of Western-backed leadership that causes people to find emancipation in the most reactionary forces, in the most reactionary groups, in the most reactionary ideologies. Iran is right there. It is a perfect representation of this. It is seen an anti-Western force. And of course, they are brutal. Of course, they are theocratic. Of course, they're awful. Not a single person, not a single leftist, for example, living in Iran will tell you otherwise. Like, nobody wants to live under a theocratic dictatorship. You can't have a democratic process if you're constantly waging war against the most important, most powerful military machine on the planet.
I'm not condoning this, but again, when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, against Western targets, of course I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been from a very young age. What have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of the brothers in Israel, in Palestine, in the Arab world are not being heard. People in Iraq, like when America and Britain invaded Iraq, right? What the Arabs saw? It's like two superpowers are coming in on just regular people. So whenever there was like a bomb or like an attack on American troops, people would
starving
celebrate.
refugee tents, they started digging Hamas tunnels through cement with bare
are
hands.
Very inflammatory, and it is not
Good one,
right.
dude. You got it.
Those people had nothing else. All they say is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just gonna scratch your eyes. I'm gonna scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No, but it is understandable. Again, it's not the right thing, but it's not like understandable. It's like, no. Again, it is an explanation.
This is hard for people to understand. They don't get it. They will never get it.
Innocent civilians in Israel. This is what have the Arabs seen for years on the Arab world. For example, if you look up Sderot cinema, this is in 2014.
Good point. Explain how racist some people are.
The Israelis in the Sderot, the kibbutz or the settlement, they went on a hill and they had popcorn and they had drinks and they were like watching the show and they were cheering with every rocket coming down. This is what we see. Western people didn't see that.
Well, somebody found a tweet actually of mine from 2014 in which I said, at what point does what Israel is currently doing to the Palestinian people become terrorism? And because I've always said, I've spoken about this a lot over the years, and I've always tried to be extremely fair-minded, albeit nobody really wants you to be fair-minded. They want you to take a side.
It's pretty funny that like having the most tepid criticism against like Israel's apartheid regime is seen as like a peace-loving dove. That's what the standard is. The standard has already been set. Like he's just such a normal. That's such a normal way to ask. Like a normal.
To be clear, I've seen lots of video
but
clips.
I'm not talking to you, Piers.
No, I know.
I'm talking to the Western audience because I want to see I want to say this is what they see. I mean, for example, there is a very famous video for Samuel Abu Za'anin, who is like a young kid that he was shot point blank by an Israeli soldier, and he was not allowed to have any medical attention. And as his dead body was being put into the ambulance, the Jewish settlers were cheering. So for an Arab audience, this is what we see every day.
Yep.
So when they see, we heard them back. We heard their people like they heard back. It is not right. But this is what hate does. It escalates. It feeds each other. Radicalism feeds it. It is terrible, and it is just like a vicious circle. So I would like to do something that is very interesting tonight. When I invited Jon Stewart to my show, as much of like a reception that if you see on the YouTube, people just like we had to cut the 5-minute standing ovation for broadcast. People were on their feet for 5 minutes. They could not believe it. I remember Jon Stewart telling me I could never imagine that a Jewish guy from New Jersey would have that kind of reception in Cairo.
That's so okay. Jon Stewart, classic New Jersey mentality. That's anti-Arab sentiment baked into the minds of every single person, no matter how woke they are. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they celebrate you?
I want to give the story, surprise, surprise, of the suffering and the plight of the Jewish people. And I want to say that because it is very interesting when you see the trauma and the suffering that the people on the other side went through, you might understand why they're coming so. So this is, see this? This is a map of all of the history of the expulsion of the Jews.
Yo! Okay, dude. Okay, I'm gonna say it. He watches the show.
And of course, this comes back to the the whole idea about the original sin that you have.
Pull the map out.
Betrayed Jesus Christ.
Reframe it. Talk about the Anti-Semitism baked into Christianity.
First of all, they left Eastern Europe and they went to West Europe and they went to America and they were turned down and they were pushed towards Palestine. So by 1948, right before the declaration of the State of Israel, there were 2 million people living there. Only 30% of them was Jews. So the whole idea of like a land without a people to a people without a land was a marketing thing. They were already Palestinians. So suddenly, overnight, 1948, there were 1.5 million Palestinians. Half of them, 3/4 of them were overnight pushed into refugees.
Yeah.
And this is why it's called the Nakba, the catastrophe. So now we have all of this building up into the minds. And suddenly this was like a conflict, a hate, a problem that we didn't have to do anything with. This was basically pushed on us by the Europeans. You see? So this is why it is important to say that. And I'm not saying that just like, oh, let's wipe out the State of Israel. Let's like push them in the sea. No, but it's important when you talk about the conflict, that you talk about the root causes. Right? No, there was like a vibrant Palestinian culture happening over there. And right now they are erasing this culture. Suddenly I'm thinking of like Israeli feta cheese, Israeli hummus. Oh, that's an insult. Israeli hummus. Come on. I mean, take the land, but leave the hummus, man. I mean, come on. I mean, that's not fair. You are someone who's always spoken against culture, cancel culture. Right now, a whole culture is canceled.
Yeah, Israeli hummus is one that strikes at the heart of many people. It's like, are there Arab Jews? Of course there are. They don't love hummus because they're Jewish. They love hummus because they're Arab. Falafel too.
If Israel has decided to eliminate a terror group, Hamas, as the world did with ISIS, for example, and I think there are a lot of parallels given the way they behaved on October the 7th to ISIS, how do you do it if you don't do it the way Israel is currently trying to do it?
Exactly not the way that Israel does it, because if you have one of the most advanced military powers in the world, and it takes you 3 weeks, 9,000 Palestinian civilian death, 21,000 injured, as we are talking right now, Israel just bombed Kichibalia, which is a known refugee.
It was wild seeing Americans be like, what? It doesn't look like a refugee camp. It's got buildings. There's no tents.
Well, I would ask a different point. I would say not only do they have a right to defend themselves, which every country would after a terror attack, right? But they actually have a duty and responsibility to their population to try and stop that happening again to them.
They've been doing...
And I do understand, and I agree with that.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If it takes you all of that time, all of these civilians, to take out a few hundred guerrilla fighters.
We don't know how many of the people who died. We don't know.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but Bassem, you don't know and I don't know.
We don't know, but
right?
like...
We don't even know if the casualty numbers are correct because they're all coming from Hamas.
And we and we should believe Israel?
No, not necessarily, no. No, I don't believe either side.
But here's my problem with Israel.
But here's my point. I don't think we should assume that we know these statistics are correct.
That's crazy.
I don't think we should assume we know exactly.
Come on. Dude, kick his ass. Get out of here. Bro's denying what you can see with your eyes.
Have been killed in the last 3 weeks. We just don't know, do we?
So basically we're dealing with a very incompetent military force that has been sucking America dry for years, and then they cannot do the job.
But how else do they get rid of Hamas?
Not like that.
How do they do it?
I don't know, but not like that. Because they've been
I know.
Peace.
Peace. Look at the history. Look at the history of the conflict. Peace. That's the only way to starve out any kind of reactionary force, through peace.
This is not an eye for an eye anymore. This is an eye, a limb, a life, a house, a neighborhood, a whole population for an eye.
They don't sit. I mean, your friend Ben Shapiro that you particularly despise.
Oh, I love Ben Shapiro. He's very smart.
Oh, yeah, but you've been very critical. I mean, that's fair enough. I'm sure he would be of you. When I asked him about proportion, he said, I don't care about a proportionate response.
So let's kill civilians as...
Hamas did this, so we are going to get rid of Hamas.
But
it's not, in his eyes, it wasn't eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It was this group of terrorists did this, and we are now going to rid the world of these terrorists.
And this is very important to look at things in context. When you see how Israelis talk inside their community, there was a very famous post by Uriel Eritzol. He is the speechwriter of Netanyahu. He said, what is so horrific about understanding that the whole Palestinian people are our enemies? All of them are enemy combatants. We should kill them, kill their mother, destroy their homes, the homes that they raised those snakes, so no snakes will be raised in this house anymore. And this was reposted by Ali Chaket, which is the minister of, wait for it, justice. It's not about Hamas anymore. It is not about Hamas. They can tell you it's about Hamas, but it's not about Hamas. It is basically, they have said it many times, Piers. This is a way to kind of push them into Sinai. This is not about eradicating Hamas. This ship has sailed. I am sorry, but like anybody who still believes that this is about Hamas is stupid.
Why did they do it before Hamas?
I don't agree with that.
Really?
No, because I think...
But why they're...
I'll tell you what I don't agree.
There are like 100 people...
I think any country that suffered the kind of terror attack that Israel suffered, with the kind of death toll that occurred that day, 1,500 plus people.
Okay, then if Gaza has a
Kids,
nuke, then they can
young
just
women being
deploy it on
raped,
Israel
kidnapped,
then?
beheaded,
Would you have the same
reported.
perspective? Would you say the same thing, Piers?
Right, I mean, they found a young woman's skull. Right,
But,
somehow it had
but
been,
what about the
somehow it had been
but
severed
what about
from-
the babies that were beheaded?
There was a report, and you and I had this discussion on air. You falsely quoted, and I wanted to clarify that with
Yeah.
you in person. You thought I'd said that 40 babies had been
So what
beheaded.
did you say?
I never said that.
What did you say?
I said it's been reported that 40 babies were killed, some of whom had been beheaded. That's what I said.
Totally different. Yeah.
There's a very different. Well, it is different.
Yes.
Do you accept it?
I'm not a journalist, but as a journalist, wouldn't you take anything that an authority would say with a grain of thought?
Yes.
Especially if this authority have a long history of lying. And I'm just going to give a few examples. 1996, they bombed Kana. It's a refugee camp. They killed 106 people. And despite that, they knew it's a refugee camp. They said, oh, maybe it's a one-time off. 2006, they bombed Kana again. 2014, they killed 2 teenagers at a checkpoint. They denied, as usual, but CNN was there. So they said, we have to say it. 2018, they killed a medic, a Palestinian medic, and they fabricated a video showing that it's someone else, that he was a human shield. And then
I would say, Bassem,
can I just finish
Yeah, but
that?
I do want to respond.
And then 2010, they killed Ahmed Oraikat, denied it, then said it's okay, it's us. 2021, they bombed the media office in Hamas, it's not us, but no, I'm sorry. And then 11th May 2022, Shireen Abu Akleh, a reporter, your colleague, she's Palestinian, American citizen, she was shot in the head. And they provided forensic evidence and even a doctor's video that it was not them, it was Islamic Jihad. How can I expect to believe this regime, especially if the president of Israel comes down with this ridiculous thing? Have you seen that?
No.
He said, okay, this was reported by Sky News, and it was the funniest thing I've seen in so much. This was a Colin Powell moment, but like the cheap edition. Mr. Herzog said, like Isaac Herzog, it's like, we have found evidence on one of the terrorists, a manual to create chemical bombs. And then he showed this, and he showed...
That's the thing, their counter isn't even good. They're just like freestyling at this point, because it doesn't matter, because the American media, Western media will eat it up no matter how silly it is.
And what he like have like local ingredients to make, and then this is like, this is a manual of Al-Qaeda, of course, convenient state in Qaeda. And let me read it to you in Arabic because this is funny. So, النشرة الدولية المعنية بالتطوير الذاتي والمعرفي للمجاهدين, which basically say, this is basically like a catalog for self-improvement for mujahideen. I didn't know that they have life coaches. So this, and you know what Sky News said? It's like, we cannot confirm or any of this, but we will show it anyway.
So let me respond.
This is like this is a lying government.
So let me respond. I do think the Israeli government has lied.
All the time.
Right? I do think they've lied. I'm not going to dispute that. I do think they've been caught lying. I do think they've said things that turned out not to be true. I also think that 2 weeks ago, a hospital was bombed.
Yes.
And it was immediately...
Who do you think did it?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I think. Hamas immediately tell the world it was an Israeli airstrike and that 500 people were killed and that the hospital had been destroyed. The next couple of days go by. The hospital is relatively undamaged. The car park was obliterated. Many fewer people than 500 were killed.
How many people died?
We don't know, because actually we're reliant on the Palestinian Health Authority, which is Hamas in Gaza, for the figures. So we don't know the number. But a lot fewer people died, it would appear, than the
like
500.
100?
We don't know.
50?
Either way, it's appalling, but it may not have been anywhere near as appalling as was first said by Hamas. But here's the point. Most independent studies of what happened have concluded that it was almost certainly a militant stroke terror group inside Gaza, and they fired a rocket which landed in the hospital car park.
We still
in other words,
do not have any
aircraft.
evidence for this, by the way. We don't have any physical evidence.
The priest and the patriarch of the hospital, because it's called the Baptist hospital, said that they have received multiple warning from Israel that they're going to hit the hospital.
It blows my mind. Like, I'm telling you, it blows my mind, especially because the reality is it could still very well be an Islamic Jihad rocket. Okay, it could.
The New York Times has not reported that it was Israel.
No, they said
They haven't.
okay.
That's not true.
Over 10 years, Hamas launched 35,000 rockets into Israel.
And many failed.
They killed 69 people, 25% military, only part of them were civilians. So over 10 years of 35,000 rockets, they killed 69 people. But in one strike, you want to tell me that these glorified firecrackers caused that kind of damage?
Yes, it looks like they did, yeah.
Okay.
That was a very good way to dismiss this. So my original and immediate reaction to it was incredibly justified. Anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. I will go to bat. I will argue against them. And not only that, but also my immediate assumption still stands. I said on the first day, given the fact that Israel had bombed this hospital before, given the fact that Israel immediately lied and said that they weren't doing an Israeli Air Force campaign in the area while they actually were doing it. We saw it with our own two eyes using the same Al Jazeera live stream coverage that Israel tried to use falsely to create a new narrative. And knowing what I know about Israel routinely lying about bombing attacks and then trying to blame it on Islamic Jihad or Hamas, that of course, all of the circumstantial evidence on top of the only verified footage that we had at the time being consistent with an airstrike, okay, with the audio cues at the very least, made me understandably say there's is very likely to be Israel. It's definitely Israel. And also, the only way that I will say it's not Israel, considering that they had dropped 7,000 bombs thus far and had hit that very same hospital with an artillery shell in the past, if there is a third-party independent investigation that does soil testing, that shows, that finds fragments, one way or another, there's always fragments. My point is this. I was wrong on my assertion that it was a Mark 84 rocket. The damage was not consistent with that. The crater was not consistent with that. The damage from the human casualty was, but the on-the-ground damage showed that that wasn't the case. That much is true. Since then, Israel has also bombed around a hospital heavily multiple times, multiple other hospitals. They blew up the church structure in a Christian church. Anyway, that's besides the point. What I'm trying to explain here is all of the circumstantial evidence absolutely points to this being Israel. Unless there is actual conclusive evidence that it is not Israel, why the would you ever assume, especially going just off of what Israel has said, which has been completely countered, completely and utterly discredited by the New York Times, by the BBC, and every other outlet now at this point, with forensic journalists that looked into Israel's claims and immediately said, no, this is not true. This is completely unverified, unsubstantiated. Why the would you ever go, yeah, no, although Israel has killed 8,000 Palestinians so far, 3,000 children so far, this one, it's not them. And also, the idea that, like, it's only bad when Islamic Jihad accidentally blows up their own people, like, that's the only condemnable action. Every other explosion that has killed a Palestinian child is good, even if we are to assume what Israel is saying is correct. So what is the argument here? That it's only bad if Islamic Jihad accidentally blows up their own people, but when Israel is deliberately destroying the entirety of the Gaza Strip and killing 3,000 plus children, then that's good? Those are all good kills? Those are all good confirmed kills? If you ask the Israeli television channel that shows the death toll, by the way, they believe the Gaza Health Ministry. They use the Gaza Health Ministry's casualty numbers to say 8,000 plus civilians have died, including the children. That's what they say. So they believe the Gaza Health Ministry, and they say all of those Palestinians are terrorists. They call them terrorists in Israel. That's what they say on television.
He thinks about being there at 5 o'clock at the first 50 people in the line for bread, because if he doesn't, he will miss the food for his family. And he goes back and he finds a message saying that we are going to bomb your house. He comes back, he loses his whole family. Now tell me, what is a proportionate response for that?
I don't know. I don't know.
You cannot create terrorism and then you...
I don't know.
You have, they have created this.
I don't know is the answer. But Bassem, let me ask you this. Hamas will have known when they perpetrated what they did on October the 7th, what the scale of response was likely to be. How does that help the Palestinian people?
I don't know.
That they are supposed to serve?
I don't know. The wheels are already set in motion.
But it doesn't, does it?
I feel sometimes that Hamas is with us in the room, that we are bringing Hamas. Who has the power in this equation? Who has the fourth largest and strongest military power? The whole idea about Israel, it's like, oh my God, the Arabs are going to destroy us. Look at the map.
Hamas, hang on. Hamas's stated goal is the eradication of Israel and the Jewish people.
Yes.
They make no pretense about it. They've made no attempt, unlike the Nazis.
Well, that's not even true anymore, but it doesn't matter.
They've made no attempt to try and deny what they did. They brazenly boasted about it.
Yes.
They are proud of what they did. Right? And they will have known, again, the scale of what they did on October the 7th would have prompted this kind of response, which would have led to thousands of innocent Palestinians getting killed. And my question for you...
I wish the 7th of October never happened.
Right, but
every time something
you say
happened.
Hamas is everywhere. Well, yeah, actually all roads on this particular part of the crisis, and I accept it's been going on for 75 years, this conflict, but all roads in this crisis lead to Hamas and what they did.
Not necessarily, because
yes.
all roads goes to the condition that created Hamas. If the Jewish people were expelled from Europe and went to Argentina or South Africa and Uganda and went in and took the land, you would have Hamas in all of these places.
You and I can agree that the conditions Palestinian people have had to endure in Gaza for a very long time are completely unacceptable. I think it's completely unacceptable that Israel has wielded such control over the people of Gaza, working out who can come in and who can go out, turning on and off water and power on a whim, turning off the internet on and off at a whim, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's really up. And Palestinians understandably can't get mad at that.
Given that we agree that Hamas is a terror organization who have a publicly stated position of annihilating not just Israel, but Jewish people, and as we saw on October the 7th, they mean it. If you are Israel, what do you do to get rid of those people who have shown the world that's exactly what they will actually do if they get the chance?
You know what I would do? I would give the Palestinians what they deserve. Terrorism is a virus.
Yes?
It's a virus.
I agree.
If a patient with a flu came to you and you're a doctor, how can you treat that patient? How do you treat it as a doctor? How do you do?
Well, you're the doctor.
You give them nutrition, fluids, and rest. So the immunity of the body gets rid of the virus on its own. If I received that patient with a flu and I took a sledgehammer, it's like, why are you not getting better? Do you think that patient will get better? No. You are weakening him. You are making him worse.
I think if you have two groups of people who are ideologically wedded to your destruction as a state and as a populace, and you're constantly firing rockets, as Hamas have done for...
This radicalizing only goes in one direction, Piers, for you. That's the problem. He says Israelis are radicalized by Hamas rockets, which literally are nothing in comparison to what Israel does, like straight up. And then he goes, Israel is radicalized. They have to do something. They have to do terrorism, much worse terrorism in comparison to Hamas. No, the answer is simple. It's so simple. It's not that hard. It is not. The application and the practice of said answer might be difficult, but the answer from a moral quandary perspective is simple.
That is not even a question. Well, that was not even a question because that would be ridiculous.
You talk about the normalization of the region. I mean, the theory that I most buy into, supported by recent, I think, Wall Street Journal reporting that hundreds of Hamas terrorists had gone to Iran for training before this attack. It had obviously been very carefully organized. But if you're Iran and you're looking at all this normalization and you're looking at Saudi Arabia being next, this is your worst nightmare. So a perfect time to commit an atrocity like this through your proxy of Hamas.
Again, I'm not a political expert to know what is the background, but let me tell you.
It's a likely theory.
Is Hamas justified? Is all of the horrible conditions that Palestinians are living in, is that a justification for Hamas doing what they did in October 7th? Good.
Do you think so?
Of course not.
Right. So we're agreed.
No, of course.
And it may well be here, by the way.
Wait, keep going. So then ask, is Israel's response to justification?
Come back to the central point of justification, and I'm really struggling to see what else Israel is supposed to do to get rid of Hamas. And if you've got an alternative, let's hear it.
I do. Piers, this is never about Hamas.
It's a llama.
Believe me, it is never about Hamas. If somebody tells you who they are, listen. Israel has been telling the world all the time, they need to clear the Gaza Strip into Egypt.
You think that's always been the plan?
Always there. I mean, they have said it.
Why did they settle it? Why did they settle Gaza in the same way that they settled the West Bank? Of course.
He had a quote that say, I don't believe that we have made a great wrong to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia because they were replaced by a higher race, a stronger race, a more world-wisely race. This is why Queen Rania is criticizing the West. This is why we here said, like, where are your values? Because this is the crux of the problem. It's not Hamas. It's not Palestine. It is people looking at us as lesser human beings.
Bassem, I don't dispute the characterization that a lot of the Israel administration look upon Palestinians as lesser people. Otherwise, they wouldn't.
They even look at the Ethiopian Jews and Yemeni Jews like less.
I wouldn't dispute that. I want to quote you. You said, I actually believe there is a middle ground between everybody and they can meet. I direct my criticism for the extreme of each one of them. That was you, Bassem Youssef. I agree with that.
Fucking liberals.
I don't share your
man.
view.
Liberalism is a mental disorder.
I think there can't be with the current leadership structures in both countries, or both places. But I definitely think you've got to be optimistic about peace. You just need to find people that can forge it.
I hope so. But the reason, listen, I refused to come on your show when your producer first called me for the first interview because I was scared. I was afraid. For me, that was a career suicide. And I'm talking, this is even important because you are someone who's always talked about like against cancel culture, about like talking, speaking your mind out. I left Egypt and I came to America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, but I didn't know that there was a fine print said that you cannot speak about Israel. I have issue with that. Israel is a foreign country. They're allies, good.
But you can speak about Israel.
How many people lost their jobs? Even Bella Hadid. Bella Hadid, she's...
Bella Hadid.
By the way,
She hasn't lost her job.
No, but she's talked about death threats. She's talking about like being silenced.
Sure.
And by the way, Bella Hadid is with, she's Palestinian. And you know who else? Gigi Hadid, sisters.
I love the Hadid.
They are with us.
Yeah.
Anyway, so...
I know them both, they're very nice.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you are that high and you cannot speak about it, and it's not about... It's
Well, you can. You just have to have...
You can, but you'll get silenced.
And you get shot at, not literally, but metaphorically, all day long.
There should be no limits. I'm kind of like so confused as an American citizen why every American presidential candidate have to go and kiss the hand and bend the knees to AIPAC. This is a lobby that works for a foreign country interest. Why don't we have like a lobby for Saudi Arabia? At least they're giving us more money.
You know the great thing? You can say that here.
Yes.
You couldn't say it in Egypt. That's why you're living here.
Yes, but again, a lot of people feel the burn, the heat whenever they come
But
down.
if I was an American, I'd be going, all right, Bassem, all right, we'll take the criticism because you can do that in this country.
And I'm happy.
When you criticize the government in your own country,
Yeah.
they drove you out.
Yes, and that's why I came to America, to play the white man's game, to actually to pass this acquired white privilege to my children. But the problem
it's not just a country of white people.
But here's the problem.
And the white man's game, the game in America is not a white man's game. It's a game that actually has a democracy and believes in freedom of speech.
But there are dog whistles everywhere.
You're not going to be put in jail for this interview.
Or I can lose my career and I can lose jobs, and you know that.
You could in Egypt, you could.
No, here you can't.
In Egypt, they arrested you.
Here you can't.
And they threatened you, and you would have probably ended up in prison or dead.
Here, a lot of people lost their jobs because they spoke up.
It depends what they say.
Of course, but again,
if you're Kanye West and you spew anti-Semitic garbage,
I'm not.
You're going to lose. You're going to lose what you have.
I will never adopt that kind of point of view. But the thing is, there is dog whistles everywhere. As I told you at the beginning, you cannot just say it's like anti-Semites. Like I mean, now how come that the Palestinian flag is outlawed? By the way, it's outlawed in Israel. If you raise the Palestinian, you go to jail. And now they're saying like the Palestinian flag is a pro-Hamas. No, it's not a pro-Hamas. You know, I was doing a comedy show in Arizona, and a guy was like wearing like a kufiyah, like a scarf, and I took it, and I'm not like in hyperbole and like wearing symbols, but I just took it because like, why are we going to outlaw colors and flags? That is absurd. That is not right.
I agree. I don't think you should, but you should certainly outlaw Hamas.
They're already outlaw. I mean, I'm not supporting them.
Because they're a terror group.
Okay. Yeah. But the people with the power, the people who supposedly have the...
And you should, by the way, I will say this, you should be able to criticize the Israeli government without being accused of being anti-Semitic. But I have in this interview repeatedly, and I'm not anti-Semitic. I just have a problem with all of what the Israeli government's been doing.
And I have a problem with how any criticism...
If he keeps doing this, he will be, though. Because Piers has been cooking too long.
Yeah, but a lot of the people doing it are actually anti-Semitic.
Yes, but also a lot of Zionists are against Israel, that they hate the Jews. You know,
we've discussed that. I want to end on a happy.
But before that, I want to just like say 2 words about the media, which is please,
sure.
Mr. Zomlot, the Palestinian ambassador that you have. This guy lost 6 members of his family in an Israeli strike, and when he went on like some British news thing, he sat down and the lady told him.
No,
like,
Piers does deserve credit. I gave him this credit.
I'm sure you don't condemn the killing of Israeli civilians. What? In the same moment, there's another girl like called Yara Eid. She was like on Sky News, and the girl was like crying, like, I lost 30 members of my family, 17 of them are children, I lost my best friend. I was like, what did you think would happen with forget about empathy.
I think a lot of people...
What about manners?
Well, I think you have to start, I've said this repeatedly, you have to start from a place of humanity. You have to look at what happened on October the 7th and feel utterly outraged and disgusted for the loss of human life.
Yeah.
And you also have to feel that for what's happening in Gaza to innocent people. But and if you can't feel both for both sets of people, both sets of innocent people being killed, if you can't feel a sense of despair and horror over their deaths, you don't have any humanity.
Believe me, Piers, it's not really about that. There's a deep sentiment in the Middle East, in Arabs, that the West do not look at us as equal.
Well, you know what?
So what I did, I went to the machines and I asked ChatGPT simple questions.
Oh my God.
Do Israelis deserve to be free? And you know what they tell me? Yes. Israelis deserve the right like any other people. And then I asked the same question, do Palestinians deserve to be free? And you know what they tell me? It is complex. It is a sensitive issue.
Well, it's not complex. It's not sensitive. The Palestinian people should be free.
Yeah, but
And they
even the machines have...
And they should have exactly the same
anti-Semite
rights to
alert.
freedom,
We
freedom
will.
of expression and the way to lead their lives and to water and to power and to internet that Israelis have and we have here in America and we have back in my home country of the UK. And I want that for the Palestinian people. We've got to end it there.
Okay.
Mainly because I've worked up a hell of a hunger in 2 hours of interview and you have brought your wife's cooking. Hala, so tell me again how I do this.
Okay, so basically...
Take a piece of this,
you
put it in the olive oil.
Yes.
Which is from the West Bank.
Yeah, from the West Bank.
And then a little bit of this.
Yes.
Like that?
Yes, yes. This is like amazing oil coming from the olive tree. This has come from the West Bank.
Bro, he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve such delicious...
800,000 olive tree, just to...
That is absolutely delicious.
I know.
Please thank your wife for me.
Thank you.
Wish her all the best and her family, particularly those who are obviously in Gaza. It's been great to see you.
I understand what you're saying correctly. Basically, that you said the conditions set by Israeli policies enacted on Palestinians have created Hamas. Do you have an opinion on what should be done differently? What do you think will bring a genuine change? Doing the exact opposite of what they've done thus far will literally, legitimately destroy any kind of reactionary force dead in its tracks. I'll tell you, there have been numerous touch points, numerous hinge points within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if you want to call it that, even though I call it an apartheid state, I call it ethnic cleansing. At every single instance, damn near every single instance, okay, Israel had an opportunity to move in a peaceful trajectory and refuse to do so, and actually purposefully utilize the developed pathway to peace that America was quote unquote forcing their hand into considering as an opportunity to take more land. The most contemporary example of this is the Palestinian Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you do not still understand. Maybe you guys do, but a lot of those at home do not understand the difference between the West Bank and Gaza. While people living in the Gaza Strip are Palestinian and so are people living in West Bank, these two areas are controlled by different forces. Forces that have actually been at war with one another historically. The Palestinian Authority has been brought under the Israeli security apparatus. The Palestinian Authority, run by Fatah, secular forces, was basically neutered, okay? Completely neutered. Israel had an opportunity to show the Palestinians, the 2.5 million living in the West Bank and the 2.2 million living in the Gaza Strip, what Israel will do if you collaborate with them, if you actually are earnest about towards peace. Because those people never did anything. And yet all they have experienced is death and destruction, losing their homes, losing the opportunity to get back into the West Bank if they ever leave, having their freedom of movement restricted, having their lives be completely controlled by an occupying force. Even in the last 20 years, Israel could have very easily said, guys, look, we have a secular group here and we're working with them and we are going to ensure that because this secular group operates this area, we're going to follow through on conditions that third-party negotiators has set forth for us. But they did not do that. They did the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, time and time again, both in practice but also in theory, Netanyahu, we always negotiate with Hamas. We will always use Hamas. If you want to destroy, if you want to thwart any attempt of Palestinian statehood, then you have to prop up Hamas, and everyone already considers them to be terrorists. Therefore, you have to say they are the voice of the Palestinians. We control how high the fires go. These are the words of Benjamin Netanyahu. Piers forgot his interview with Jimmy Carter where he said Hamas accepts that Israel exists and that they agree on a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders. This is also true. Not that it matters. Hamas's updated charter is much more liberalized in their effort in 2017 to try to become a global representative of the Palestinian people. Of course, it doesn't really matter. You've mentioned that Israel funded Hamas through Qatar. Can you explain more? Benjamin Netanyahu has sent direct money to Hamas leadership by way of Qatar in the past. The Israeli government, or at least its security forces, Mossad, specifically also beefed up Hamas early on, knowing full well that there could be an adequate counterweight, the Palestinian movement that was Islamist fundamentalist, against the much more popular secular forces within the Palestinian liberation. Now, when that first happened, of course, much like America's massive ups every single time, they were simply a charity front. But Israel's actions in the last 20, 30 years have basically created an incredible opportunity for Hamas to seize more and more influence as they radicalize Palestinians by killing them, by taking their homes, by burning their homes, by engaging in pogroms in the West Bank, by not letting them practice their religion freely, just basically maintaining an apartheid regime. This is what happened.